This is the Dallas Morning News.
Hello, everybody. Welcome into SportsDay Insider presented by the Dallas Morning News. I am Kevin Sherrington, joined by my pals Evan Grant and David Moore. David's here in the Dallas area with me. Evan's up in the Windy City, the Frozen City, Chicago.
I am just now defrosted.
You're just now defrosted. You know, they shouldn't be able to play baseball, or they shouldn't play baseball in weather that cold. It's dangerous. But we'll get into the Rangers' problems playing in the cold and facing left-handers and their offense in general a little bit. But first of all, we kind of got some big news coming up this week. Luka Doncic is coming back to town on Wednesday. I thought there might be the faintest possibility, because it's a back-to-back for the Lakers, and they were coming off a back-to-back at the end of last week, that maybe they would decide that Luka shouldn't play and just take the emotion out of all of it. But they can't really do that, can they, David?
I wouldn't think so. You look at it, I think they'll probably maybe do a little rest in Oklahoma City, I guess, as before, and then coming here. So we'll see how it plays out. You know, they got on a good stretch there, but Luka lately hasn't looked that good. And so it's kind of, they're still trying to, work out the rhythms of how those three guys, with Austin Reeves too, with LeBron and Luka, how they work all of that out, because they're not getting much beyond those three at all. So there is kind of a sense of, okay, what role can you guys develop for the postseason around these three? And I think they're going to spend as much time doing that as they can, and there's not much time left in the regular season.
Yeah, that's right. And they're still positioning too, right? You can't
Sure.
be losing any ground. So I guess they wouldn't do that. This is really going to be something. I'll be out there Wednesday night, just kind of write about the scene and what that's all like. I'm trying to think of any time a former Dallas athlete has returned and the reception from the crowd after that. I don't think, nothing pops into my head, and I just can't imagine anything quite like this.
Jalen Brunson was the latest example, but the other end of it, early in franchise history, you had the opposite end where Kiki Vandeweghe didn't want to come here. And then when he did show up here, the crowd erupted into boos every time he touched the ball.
That's right. I remember that. Exactly. Yeah.
On the Rangers front, I think you had a pretty decent comp. When Alex basically talked his way out of here after winning the MVP and went to New York, He wasn't met with what I would call a real warm welcome, and that pretty much stayed intact the rest of his career.
Yeah, Alex Rodriguez, of course. So
Luka was adored here. So, I would imagine it is going to be fascinating. I would imagine the cheers for him individually when he does something will rival or exceed what happens when the Mavericks do something, at least early in the game. In the second half, if it's a competitive game and Dallas has a chance to win, they're still scrapping for a play-in spot, then I think it balances out a little bit, and the rooting for the home team, supersedes that. But early in the game, I would anticipate the reaction to positive moments for Luka would be a little more enthusiastic than the positive moments for the Mavericks.
Yeah, I think that the Mavericks aren't they scheduled? It seems to me I read at some point that they were scheduled to do some kind of tribute for Luka when he comes back, which I find that incredibly awkward. It's one of those things where I think you're better off not doing anything, because bringing him back now, this was the whole problem. First of all, trading him to the Lakers, a team in your conference, and so that was a huge mistake. And then all the stuff that they leaked out about him and all the bad stuff they said about him, after that, and then the disparity between that and when Kyrie Irving went out and Nico Harrison practically bawled at his feet, about the fact that he was going to be out. All of this just seems really awkward. I would prefer, if I were them, just to toe the line and just say, yeah, that's it. We're not doing any big thing for
Well,
them.
I will say this: at this point, the Mavs are damned if they do and damned if they don't. It's a no-win situation for them, because if they don't welcome him back, then it's just a cold it's a cold franchise. If they do welcome him back now, it looks like it's a disingenuous franchise. So this is all, again, what the Mavs have brought upon themselves with the trade and how they've handled the aftermath. And I disagree with David on what the reaction will be, even in the second half. I do not think that Mavs fans want this game. I don't think they want them to win this game. I don't think that they want to see anything positive out of this. They want to reinforce. I mean, if the Fire Nico things have lasted this long, I think Mavs fans are going to be wholly on the side of Luka Doncic all game long.
Yeah, I'm seeing photos of personalized license plates now with Fire Nico on the license plates in Dallas.
I think that there's a lot of Mavs fans out there. When you go to the games, there are still, for all the talk about, season ticket holders canceling and all that stuff. And no, there's not as many people at the game, but there's still a lot of people at the games. There's a lot of just straight Mavs fans, basketball fans who still want the team to win. So I'll be interested to see what the reaction is overall in the game. But David, I wanted to talk.
And it will be very quick. I'll say though, while Luka is beloved by a large section of the fan base, and I think there'll be a lot of the reaction, I do agree. It's also going to be over the top for him, because that's a lot of fans' way of still showing their displeasure for what happened. So it's partially welcoming Luka and letting him know, that he felt wronged. And they agree with him, but it's also digging in on the organization that, like, look, we're still not happy with you either. And there is a core that's going to be, faithful regardless. But there are levels to that too, right? And it's not just the core, it's how much they engage a team, how excited they are about a team, how much they follow it. And that has unquestionably been dampened with their actions.
Yeah, no question about that. So, David, one of the things that we've got to see in a limited sample size, obviously, but since the return of Anthony Davis, and Derek Lively's back now too, we've seen him play really well. I mean, especially offensively, he's scoring better than a point a minute most of the time. So he's certainly responded in that sense. But it isn't translating to wins. And there were plenty of times when Luka was here, when he was without, key components of the team, and he was still able to lift the team to wins. We saw that repeatedly over the years. So to me, this already is starting to look bad from the standpoint of if you're basically trading these things, it wasn't a straight up trade, but it's pretty close to it. If that's what you're trying to do, and this guy is not able to put the team on his back to win games, then you've already shown that you have lost, haven't you?
Well, and that was going to be Kyrie's role, right? That was going to, it wasn't a 1-for-1 per se. Nico wanted a two-way player, which Anthony Davis is, an outstanding defender. And I think some of those, okay, now clear out, let the guy go to work moments that Luka did. That's not who Anthony Davis is as a player. Kyrie Irving has shown that's who he is as a player. So I think we haven't seen how they envisioned this trade was going to work, except for 2.5 quarters there in Davis's debut. Right. And that's the thing. It's Davis without Kyrie Irving in there. Davis can't have the impact that he was brought in here to have, because, you mentioned it. If with this current cast, would they have won more games with Luka than Anthony Davis? Yes, no question, because Luka doesn't just score, the offense goes through him, and the defense its entire defensive scheme is based off of what Luka is doing at any particular time, or trying to deny him the ball, something like that. Anthony Davis isn't that type of player. You don't run the offense through Anthony Davis. You don't dictate the offense through him. And so a player that the offense goes through him and he dictates the offense always has a greater impact than what Anthony Davis will, no matter how good he is.
Yeah, I get that, and I get what David, what you're saying with the standpoint of what Nico was trying to do, and I've gotten it all along. I understand what he was trying to build here. It's just a faulty premise, obviously, because you're talking about players who aren't always available, and that was the big complaint about Luka. But now I'm seeing where, and we talked about this before, and I thought this was interesting. I saw someone on one of the talking heads somewhere said that, they should have traded for Austin Reeves, instead of Anthony Davis. If you're going to get a Laker who's a younger guy, he's a scorer, and he's emerged as the third guy. Although I will say this: if he had brought back Austin Reeves in that deal, the howling really would have been loud. I mean, at least Anthony Davis has been a multiple-time All-Star, and we see that, and that would have been a disaster to do that.
I think it was Reeves more as the add-on to Anthony Davis than the
if you got Anthony Davis and Austin Reeves,
instead of
okay. Mm-hmm. Now you're talking, because now look what's happening a little bit to Max Christie here. He's kind of hit a wall, and he's not, really done very much. And everybody was so excited about that, right. And
here's something else to your point too. You're talking about, Luka lifting the guys around him. Does PJ Washington look like the same guy he was last year?
No. I mean, see, Dave, that's the thing about this. And we were just talking, you were mentioning earlier about the Lakers, and they don't have much beyond those three guys. No, they don't. And that's the whole problem with building around multiple superstars, right? Mm-hmm. Is that you don't have anything left for the rest.
You're going to leave yourself short unless you hit on young guys in the draft.
Absolutely. And I think that's what the beautiful thing to me was about the Mavericks, was that these guys they had brought in were really functioning pieces. They were really good around that core. There was a time when there was too much just standing around waiting for Luka to do something, right? But they kind of had evolved. The offense had evolved, certainly through Kyrie Irving. It helped tremendously. But they had picked up the pace. It wasn't such a plodding offense anymore. And people, I would get stuff from people who didn't like Luka, who always complained about that. It's like, you're talking about the Luka of 2023 or 2022. You're not talking about the Luka of 2025. That's not what the offense is anymore. And that was, of course, the thing to me in the end was you took something that was this close to winning a title and decided, no, let's just blow this up. And we're going to go with something completely different, and we're going to win it all. And now look where you are.
And two completely different teams in the conference finals in 3 years.
Yes.
So you showed that you can have different components and still be successful around them.
Yes, no question.
Although I will say this, based on Kevin's writing, there's a little level of incongruity here, because he likes GMs making decisive, bold moves. And I mean, this definitely is bold. And how come you didn't love it, Kevin?
He didn't trade PJ Washington. He didn't trade one of those other little guys. That's just a complimentary piece. He traded the best player in franchise history. So, that's I like people being active, I believe is what I said, not bold. Active. And Nico was active, right? He was making deals all the time. He made a deal at every trade deadline. He's making a deal,
And he had a pretty good track record at that.
Well, one of our listeners wrote me and said that, you know what? I listened to the podcast late one week, and it was after the trade. And he said, and I laughed for a mile at the part where Kevin said that Nico Harrison was maybe the best GM in the market, and then, up until the moment of that trade, I thought he was doing a great job.
And what was the subsequent trade? He traded Quentin Grimes, who was scoring 40 plus for Philly, for a front court guy who's hardly gotten on the court.
Well, and that was a disaster, that trade, because not only did he do that and lose that, but he put himself in financial straits where they could not add, another player. So that's why they were playing with, 7 and 8 players. It was like, that was, as bad as the Luka trade was, that was malpractice to put yourself in that kind of position where you're not even able to compete now because of that. So I think that kind of goes back to, and I don't have any proof of this, but we've heard that, that Nico, a little thin skinned, and if things don't go exactly the way he wants to, then you're out. And when Quentin Grimes would not sign a contract beyond this year, he was kind of betting on himself this year. They couldn't get that deal done. I have a real feeling that Nico was like, "You don't want to play for us, you're out." And
you can't be that reactionary. You just
you can't
be that reactionary.
But I think that's what he is. I think that's what we demonstrated, or he demonstrated in the Luka trade. It's like, I'm not willing to wait on this guy. That's it. We're done.
I mean,
I know we need to move on. But, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to overtalk, David. Go ahead.
No, I just went the other thing. This and how is Nico and others in those positions going to justify it? Well, this is about culture. Quentin Grimes wasn't sure he wanted to be here. Fine, we don't want you here. We want guys who want to be here. We want guys who buy in. Has Luka bought in on everything? No, and so you can always use culture as a shield, but when you do it at this level with the results they've gotten on these two deals, it breaks up pretty quick.
And there are always compromises on culture, right? I mean,
Sure.
you have to. You cannot be rigid on any of this stuff. And look, I think Chris Young has as high a principle as any GM I've ever been around. But even he acknowledges that there's got to be some ability to compromise. The Aroldis Chapman deal was a prime example of that. And the Rangers did give away, in that deal, a really good pitcher in Cole Reagans, but they ended up walking away with a World Series. I just think that one of the things that has come out in all of this from you guys in particular has been that Nico's inability to be flexible or to see it any other way than his way. And, I think I've said this once or twice in this whole process, it's not about you, it's about the players. And in the day and age of I'm going to mold men into who I want them to be, and they're going to do it my way or the highway, that's gone in every sport, man. You've got to be more flexible than that. And you've got to be able to reach different people in different ways.
Well, it's no question. It's all about, especially with superstars, you just got to find out a way to work with them. You don't.
Jimmy Johnson wasn't yelling at star players to get over to the asthma field.
That's exactly right. We always said that, right? That for all the tough talk with Jimmy,
what did he say? He said, "Hell yeah, I treat everybody differently."
Well,
that's what being a good coach is, and it is.
Absolutely, you do treat everybody differently because people need different things. So anyway, all right, that's going to do it for the Luka segment of our podcast. We're going to move over now.
It's really a Nico segment.
Luka Nico.
Before we move on,
becomes a referendum on Nico.
Should we put an over/under on points for Luka Wednesday night? Let's set it at 34. Set it at 34.
I think 34 is good because I was thinking he was going to score 35. So yeah, I'll take the over.
Evan?
77.
That would be over.
Then he's just going to say, "Oh, I thought you were asking for his number."
I think it would be appropriate, wouldn't it? But you know what? Let's go with this. Let's go with a tribute to Dirk. I'll take 41.
Okay, good.
Since y'all took the over, I'll take the under, but I can see a big one here. Yeah, just if he's too hyped, like in that first time they faced each other.
Could be. That would be the one thing. He was a little too hyped. It's certainly possible. And I think it will be. All right. Evan, you're in Chicago where the Rangers got blanked Monday night, 7-0. Not good anywhere for the Rangers. Not good with Nate Eovaldi coming off that complete game shutout. And certainly another pretty poor effort from the Rangers on offense. They're just all or nothing on offense. Either they hit a home run, they hit multiple home runs. They are stealing bases, and I give them that because they haven't done that under Bruce Bochy's time here, and was always a frustrating thing to me in an age when they've done everything but say, "Here you go, have a stolen base if you want it," and they were not doing it, and they are doing that this year.
But I will say this, Kevin. Last night was a night for them to steal some bases, and when they got guys, because you want to try and manufacture runs, that's what the Cubs did with their first two runs, and the Rangers weren't able to do that. And when Josh Smith ran, he looked slow. And the thing for me last night, and I tried to say this in my column, is that I think the Rangers looked slow. I think the cold did affect them, and this is a character building exercise. I don't take anything from this game and say, okay, this applies to this season. but I do want to see, it's going to be 33 or 34 again tonight. I do want to see how this team reacts to having been in the cold last night and how they bounce back. Because that was the one thing I took out of the clubhouse last night, that, hey, a game like this, even if you lose it, it can be a little bit of a character builder, and you have to bounce back now and figure out a way. Like, okay, the atmosphere and the conditions are not against us. How do we figure out a way to make this offense work in that situation?
Yeah, that's look, it is miserable, and we talked about that earlier. Should there be a line of demarcation, when it gets to be this cold? Because, and you could even justify it from the standpoint of a pitcher starts to get a little, numbness in his fingers, and he loses control of the pitch, and the ball sails and hits a guy in the head.
If Ollie hadn't walked a batter in his first two starts, hit two last night, and I think that the ball was a little bit slick on him. I don't think he lost feeling in his fingers, or maybe it was a combination of the two. But to your point, yeah, I think there's something there.
So they should consider, at the very least, in these places in Detroit, in Chicago, which they don't have protection from the elements this early in the season, the weather is this bad. The very least they should do is schedule these games for the daytime. I mean, it's not like the Cubs don't have a history of that. So it's just really, frustrating to me to see baseball not understand these things and make some kind of adjustment.
And I don't know what the temperature ended up being in Detroit at last night at game time, but, it was 38 in Detroit, and they played in snow, but it wasn't as cold as it was last night here on the banks of Lake Michigan, where it was, at the start of the game, it was 23-degree wind chill. And it was just an unpleasant night for everybody out there. And I do think, to your point, maybe you can't just bang these games this early in the season, especially with the number of interleague games that you have. Maybe that's really hard to do, and it's a last resort. But maybe what you could do is say, if the forecasted temperatures are below 40 degrees, we're going to move this up to a day game. Something to maximize the temperature of the day.
Yeah, no question about that. So, Evan, I'm like Bruce Bochy on this stuff with the offense. Sooner or later, these guys are going to hit. Sooner or later, Corey Seager is going to hit. We know that. Marcus Semien usually needs some time to get his timing down, and he'll hit. And certainly other guys across the line. And they've gotten some production out of the bottom of the lineup. I got to tell you, I'm more a believer in Josh Smith than ever before. I all last year, I couldn't believe in him as even though he was a silver slugger, as a role player, utility player. I just couldn't do it. I'm seeing it now. I have to say, he's a very valuable player for them, and I know that was a concern if Josh Young was going to stay healthy. Was how were they going to get him 4 or 5 games a week and keep him in the lineup, because he is more the kind of player that they need now. They are kind of they built themselves to be a slugging team. And unfortunately, that comes a little bit at the expense of, we need a few guys who can just get on base because of the way the rules are and the way you can steal bases now. We need a few guys who can help us manufacture some runs.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things here with Josh Smith. Last year he did have a great first half, and I do think that playing every day did wear him down a little bit. Now, there's entirely possible that he got something from that and will be able to hold up better if he gets 600 plate appearances this year. But I do think you can play him regularly without having to play him 6 days a week. You can play him 4 or 5 days a week all around the infield and get him playing time. I think the other thing that starts to emerge here, though, is, a bunch of Josh Young's injuries have been freak injuries, but he's been hurt. And I do think at some point in time, it becomes a question of who's performing better. And if Josh Smith is performing better at third base than Josh Young is, I think the Rangers are going to have to start looking in that direction and say, okay, we're talking about meritocracy in center field. We need to talk about meritocracy elsewhere. So I think that's something to watch. Obviously, Josh Young is going to come back, and I think he's going to play third base tonight. But you'll all have the answer to this by the time the podcast gets uploaded. So, but I do think that over the course of this week, you'll see Josh Smith play short one day, particularly for Corey Seager and that calf in this cold weather. I think you'll see him get Marcus Simeon a day off, maybe Thursday or Wednesday or Friday in Seattle to give Marcus 2 days off. And I think there's a lot of ways you can use Josh to help maximize the effectiveness of all the other guys around the diamond that could use a little bit of time. So it's been yeah. I think I wrote this on Sunday or I tweeted it that Josh Smith needs to play every day, and by every day I mean regularly. I don't expect him to go out and play 150, but he needs to be playing regularly. Right now, he's the one guy in the offense who is figuring out a way to get on base.
Yeah,
Well, he and Jonah Heim.
Sure, and that does. And look what's happened with Jonah Heim now that he's splitting more time with Kyle Higashioka. I think that was probably for me the biggest sin Bruce Bochy in his first 2 seasons was he just played Jonah too much. He was catching too many games. It clearly affected him, and the carryover into last year was significant.
Well, I think there was a big split between what they saw they had in Jonah and what they had as a backup. And, once they got Carson Kelly last year, they played them a little bit more equally. But I think by that point in time, the damage was done. Jonah was still dealing, I think, with the hand injury and the wrist injury from 2023. He was tired. It put him in a bad headspace, and it was just a disaster of a year. But these are the things, Kevin, that I think about where this offense is concerned. This team is, as we record this, they're 8-3, and they haven't scored a ton of runs. But the guys that we talked about that needed to have big bounce back years were Jonah Heim and Adolis Garcia. And I've seen good processes from both guys, better results from Heim so far than from Garcia. But I've seen what I think is a pretty good process from Adolis, particularly with 2 strikes. I think Leody Taveras is a guy we had a lot of questions about. And certainly he's not hitting the ball where the Rangers think he's capable of, but he is maximizing his value by being much more aggressive on the base pass. And so I look at these first 11 games and I say, yeah, the offense hasn't been great, but I'm seeing some signs that once everybody does kind of get their feet under them this season, that this offense has the ability to be really, really dynamic. And to your point, no, Bruce Bochy teams haven't run in the past. I think in San Francisco and with the Rangers, his team's ranked 24th of 30 in stolen bases. So they are employing more. They're making more of an effort to run this year.
Yeah, I think this is where what we see in the organization nudging, Bochy a little bit here is that, listen, all the analytics say you have to do this, because of the limitations that are put on pitchers and throwing over and all the rest of it. You simply have to take advantage of this. Anytime that they're going to give you some kind of advantage in baseball, you're crazy not to take advantage of it, no matter what your previous track record is. It's just not that. It's just too hard to throw out a runner these days. I mean,
but what we're saying here, right? The situation has changed. And Bruce Bochy, a Hall of Fame manager with over 4,000 games of experience, what's he done? He's not said, no, we're going to double down on doing it my way. He said, okay, let's figure out ways to make this running game more a part of our identity. And I think that goes back to the last segment. You've got to be malleable to what the circumstances and what your talent is, and maximize that rather than say, no, we're not going to do that.
Well, I mean, that's the thing about Bochy that makes him so appealing is that for as smart as he is, and we know how smart he is, no matter how dumb he plays or tries to make it look, he's a brilliant guy, but he's got very little ego. He's got an ego, but it's very little. If I were going to rank the egos of the Rangers managers over the last 25 years, he'd be in the bottom third, I think, especially from the standpoint of what he's done. For a guy who's accomplished everything he has, to have as, he doesn't want to show up anybody. He doesn't want to show you how smart he is. He doesn't feel the need to do any of that.
No, he doesn't. He just wants to win, man.
Yeah, and that's what comes across to his players, right? And that's what in all these kind of situations, when you have hung the skins on the wall like he has, and then you come across the way you do in your clubhouse and into your coaches, well, then that's an inspiring thing. Players really love that kind of response, especially in baseball.
Yeah, there was, and this is just silly, but at the end of the game last night when we walked into the clubhouse, he's standing on his desk and he's got his arms crossed against his body, almost like
standing on his desk.
He was sitting on the edge of his desk. I'm sorry.
He's standing on his desk.
Visual, him standing on the desk.
It was kind of like stand sitting. You know how you on the edge of the desk right there. He wasn't dancing on the desk or anything. But he walked in there. When we walked in there, his hands are kind of clasped against his body, and I go, "Are you shivering?" And he goes, "Oh no, this is a power position." You know, he's very self-effacing in the way he talks about himself. And before the game last night, you know, to your point about all how this rubs off on guys. Yesterday was Adrian Beltre's birthday, so there were a couple of guys in the clubhouse, like the clubhouse manager, Brandon Boyd, who called Adrian to wish him a happy birthday. It came up that Bruce's 70th birthday is going to be April 16th, and it also came up that Bobby Wilson's birthday is actually today. And Bobby walked into the office, and Boach said, "Bobby, what can I get you for your birthday? What do you need?" And Bobby's kind of Boach's whipping boy. Boach loves him. They're both catchers, both low ego guys. And Bobby just said, "Boach, all I want for my birthday is a win." And that's, you know, that's kind of where their head's at right now. They all are on the same page.
Yeah, they'll figure this out. I think in their problems in their offense. And meanwhile, the pitch has been terrific.
They will, and if they don't, they'll just trade Seager for somebody.
Yeah, that's right. We need that kind of trade. In this market, we need something else like that to happen. All right, that's going to do it for the Rangers segment of our podcast. We're going to move over now and talk about the Cowboys off season. David, they made themselves a deal for Joe Milton III from the Patriots after it became clear that Joe Milton was kind of saying he wanted to compete with Drake May to be the starting quarterback for the Patriots this fall. I don't think that was going to happen. I don't know that you want a guy to be competitive, David, but you don't want him. And maybe that's a different situation with Drake May. He's not an established quarterback, but you don't want Clint Longley in here either, do you?
No. But again, they came in the same draft, right? They were both the same draft class. I think he did the one game he played, he looked good.
He did.
Let's say that. But yeah, Drake May is that guy, and you need to establish him. It's like early here when the Cowboys made a trade early. They had a couple of good young quarterbacks, and one of them, Troy Aikman, felt threatened by him.
Steve Walsh.
A lot of it is age, and look, Joe Milton comes in here. He in no way, shape, or form threatens Dak Prescott, and he knows that he can't compete for the starting job with Dak Prescott this year. But he's going to say, "Well, of course, I'm his backup. Let's see, let's go."
And so, the way it looks right now, Will Grier, if I were to guess, he's going to end up being the number 2.
I would still put Will Grier ahead of Joe Milton right now for sure. But we talked about it earlier, and Stephen Jones, said from the combine in Indianapolis in February that they wanted to take a developmental quarterback, which is you use one of those 5th or 6th or 7th round picks on a quarterback in day 3. In essence, that's what they did. They traded one of their 3 compensatory picks in the 5th to New England and got Milton and a 7th. So they got another pick back, which is only going to be about 34 spots behind what they gave up for Milton. So it was a no-brainer move for them. And it lets you know they didn't think there was particularly any good depth down in day 3 as far as getting a quarterback to develop. So they liked a little something about this guy, get him in and see if anything works.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a really short quarterback class at the top. Yeah. It's not great. It's good, but not great. And then after those first couple go off the board, really a lot of questions about the rest of them after that. So yeah, I like Joe Milton as much as any of the guys you could have gotten.
Real strong arm.
He does. He's a big guy, 245 pounds. I would, I say that, Joe would slide in as the 3rd, but if you're not going to get him any more time than you got Trey Lance, then it becomes one of those things. And then what was the point? If you're not going to really develop him, if he's not going to get any practice time, if he's not going to get any game time, then what was the point of taking him in the first place? I would really like to see for the Cowboys, if Dak Prescott's not going to run anymore, then put Joe Milton out there in a couple of packages and put him on the field and let him see what he can do. I don't think there's anything wrong with trying to do something that's going to give the opposing defense something to think about. We got to prepare for this. When they bring Melton into the game, maybe a couple of times a game, why not?
Yeah, you saw, you saw New Orleans do that with Taysom Hill. You've seen teams spot players in there. Now, sometimes you still have to be able to pass. If you don't have a few pass variations off of that, then you're dictating exactly what you're doing.
Oh, absolutely.
But if you do it well, that's also why change it up? I mean, if you have 3 running threats back there and your quarterback's one of them, and you're 3rd and 2, why mess around with, well, we got to throw to keep teams off balance too? Just do it.
Well, you could, it's a little bit like with Texas when they bring Arch Manning in at the end there, and finally it got to the point after one of the playoff games, they had a little availability there, and I asked Arch Manning, are you allowed to throw the ball? Because he was not doing it, and he kind of smiled and said, "You'll have to ask Coach Sark about that." And so, if you're not going to let him throw the ball at all, no, it's not as effective. He's going to have to do it, but it's not like he couldn't. And so I'm just all for that kind of thing. That was the problem, for that Wildcat that came and went, was that the Wildcat never threw the ball. Just decided where he take one quick look. If there's something there, throw the ball. If not, take off. It's just not that. It's not that complicated to me. But what do I know? So David, things have kind of quieted down about the draft now, and I think that's interesting to me. We don't see a lot of talk about things, and maybe that'll just, it's just a natural progression, and it'll all heat up here in the next couple of weeks. But let me just ask you this first: do you believe at this point the Cowboys will hold on to the 12th pick?
I think so. But if they do make a move, I would see them tumbling back a few spots and picking up an additional 3rd round pick. We saw that a few years ago when they got Micah Parsons. 2 corners that they wanted and fixated on went to 2 picks before they were on the clock. They moved back a couple of spots, picked up a 3rd round pick, and which they used on Tyler Biadasz. Can't think off the top of my. Anyway, they picked up an additional pick and then moved on. So I could see them doing that. I think that would appeal to them. But I think they're also very happy just sitting at 12 because, as we talked about, when you look at their positional needs, potentially the top wide receiver. So I don't think running back. I just do not see Genty getting there the way the game has gone, and especially with some of the coaches on these teams ahead of Dallas. I just don't see Genty getting all the way to 12. So let's take running back off the board, but there's still a chance you could get the top wide receiver on your board, maybe the 2nd best pass rusher, or interior defensive tackle, and arguably the top corner.
Who do you believe is the top wide receiver on their board, David?
I mean, I do think the Arizona guy, Millen.
Roy McMillan, yeah.
Yeah. He's a little bit different skill set. He would seem to be a good counterpoint. But they brought in, one of their 30 visits was a Mecca, the Ohio State receiver.
Luka, yeah. To me, I could see either one of those guys being a fit, because Egbuka was their 2nd receiver at Ohio State, right? They had the freshman that was so sensational for Ohio State this year, and he didn't seem to have a problem with conceding that to him. And then the thing to me about McMillan is that the Cowboys have seemed a little fixated, which is why they made the trade for Jonathan Mingo, on getting a big wide receiver, a guy who's a big target, more of a possession type receiver. I think that you could certainly make the case they could use a Matthew Golden because of his speed.
Mm-hmm.
He was the fastest player at the combine. Somebody could take the top off of a defense. That would be great. And I do think that in my mind, if I'm looking at those guys, I think I might like Golden a little better just because of the speed.
The speed,
and,
yeah.
And the fact that also he runs really good routes and he's very good at the point of catch. I mean, he not like McMillan, who's huge, and somebody who would be maybe a little more effective in that type of scenario. And I do think that's part of the deal with the Cowboys.
Luther Burden's another guy who's coming in on their 30 visits as well.
And he's a guy whose stock has fallen,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't. The question is how much of that is his fault, how much of it was Missouri's. Their offensive game plan not very good, didn't maximize him. So I think that probably is not his fault. He's a guy a little faster as well. I think going into the season, he was probably considered. He might have been considered the top.
He might have been though, yeah. And that's the thing. I don't think there is a consensus number one. My belief is if you talk to 10 teams in the league, you would have 4 different receivers, who are at the top of their board. I just don't think it's in the eye of the beholder there. And it's not like some past receiver classes where you undoubtedly had 1 or 2 guys at the top who are going in the top 10. The first receiver who goes could be at number 12 to Dallas if they decide to go in that direction.
So David, let's say this then, because I don't have a problem with them taking a wide receiver if that's what they want to do there, because it's certainly an area of need. I prefer. I'm on record saying I like to see them take Jahdae Barron, who plays a little bit of everything in the secondary. Very aggressive player, very smart player, a real leader, a terrific kid all the way around. Is there any progress on anything to see that Amari Cooper might make a return here?
It doesn't sound like anything, is, and again, it says something that he's still out there too, right?
It does. And
normally
I'm
at
wondering
this
what
point,
that is.
Yeah. Normally at this point, if a guy that has the resume he has not signed, most teams are just going to go, okay, let's do it after the draft, and his agent's probably going, well, look, you sign now, you're just signing. If a team goes into the draft and wants a receiver, comes out and doesn't get it, you're going to make more money. So most of these guys now, the name free agents, even the name guys who are on the back end of their careers usually don't sign right now. It's like, well, what's the point? Just stay in shape. We'll sign you. The heavy lifting in the offseason program begins right after the draft anyway. We'll get you in here by then, and you're not going to miss anything.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess the same thing with Calais Campbell. Then he hasn't signed, has he? Did I miss that?
No. So yeah, Calais Campbell. Yeah, so him too. I think it's just like, and this is a good. There's a lot of good young interior defensive line talent in this draft. Walter Nolan's a guy who's also coming in on 30-day visits for them.
I wouldn't have a problem with him at 12 either. That might be a little high for him, but he's a defensive tackle who has, that little bit of that fast twitch, got some pass rush in him, which is what everybody wants now out of a defensive tackle, as long as he can still, play the run as well too. And he's good at that. So, that's the beauty of 12 where they are. They could get, if they're not getting the best player at the position, they're going to get the second best probably. And there's several places that they could go to do that.
And that's where too, if they're sitting there at 12 and there are, like I said, on the receivers, I think is kind of beauties in the eye of the beholder. A good scenario for them would be at 12, no receivers off the board. They're sitting there looking at, say, 5 players on different positions that they essentially have the same grade on, and they are completely content with any of those 4 to 5. You just go, okay, this picks up, this pick's for sale. We're not going to move back more than 4 spots. What do you have? And that's, I can certainly see that scenario unfold on draft night.
Well, I think that might be a good play for them too. The one problem with is, as you kind of do these little jigsaw puzzles about what they do in the first, second, third round, is that I can see certainly there's lots of running backs. They could take a running back in the third round and be just fine. I think,
I don't know that they can take a receiver after the second round, and even their second round receiver might be repetitive with what they have. I mean, is it going to be that much different than Jalen Tolbert, who they got in the third round a few years ago? So I think there are fewer wide receivers at the top. So if you wanted to come out of this draft with a wide receiver, I think you have to look pretty strong at doing it in the first round, because I don't know that the value is going to be there from 2 on. Where at running back, you're still going to have value in the third round.
Yeah, you will. And there's defensive tackles that you can get in the second round. There's a lot of other ways to go. It's just fewer ways that you can get that wide receiver. That's why they had to re-sign Amari Cooper. But I guess they're not going to accommodate me on that. All right, that's going to do it for the Cowboys segment of our podcast. Now we're going to move over now and talk about. Well, I'll tell you, David's wearing his Florida colors tonight, to this afternoon.
I was just washed out. It is kind of red, but yeah.
Oh, it looks orange on here. It's just,
I know it does.
It's hard for me to take that as a Cougar High grad. I really thought
you kind of saw that game before, though, right?
Oh my gosh! Oh my gosh! After they beat Duke, and what a great game they played there. That second half, and scoring 9 points in 33 seconds to win that game, and after being down by as much as I guess it was 14, was just a phenomenal comeback. One of the greatest comebacks I've ever seen in any sport, to win that game against Duke. They just did a terrific job. The problem with Kelvin Sampson's teams at Houston has been that they expend so much effort on defense. It is really hard to find anybody who's going to be able to play two-way in that offense. And so most of their offense came through L.J. Cryer, the Baylor transfer, who had won a national championship in 2021 with Baylor when they eliminated U of H in the semifinals. He would have been the first player, if they had won that game last night, he would have been the first player ever to win a national championship at 2 different schools, which would have been phenomenal. And I guess the worst part about that is that you got 19 seconds to get off a shot here to either tie or win outright a national title, and you don't even get a shot off.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a brutal ending. I would rather have seen them lose 60-45, as my 90-year-old aunt said, than to lose like that. Just terrible.
Well, at least when they lost to North Carolina State had the ball. And
it's a freak play, right?
Yeah.
They didn't play with it. And of course, I was covering the U of H for the Houston Post then, and was in Albuquerque when that happened. And in my mind's eye, when Derek Whittenburg took that shot in '83, you could tell it was short. The arc of it, he was so far out, and the arc of it was short. And in my mind's eye, I saw it bouncing and going out of bounds, and then it's overtime. Then the next thing you know, Lorenzo Charles picks the ball out of the air and dunks it in one motion. And it all happened so fast, I thought Cozell McQueen had done it. It wasn't until like 20 minutes after the game that I learned that no, that was Lorenzo Charles, who had done absolutely nothing the entire game. Yeah. So, but at least in that game, it was a freak play and a great play by Lorenzo Charles at that point. To lose when you've got the ball in your hands and you don't even get a shot.
Don't even get a shot off. That's the thing. And not only what I think when you look at the game, I think Florida led for 1 minute and 4 seconds the whole game.
Correct.
And so to lead, in essence, the whole game and then have 19 seconds where it's still in your control for at least, tying it up or going to not even get a shot is quite an indictment against a team in a championship game, I think.
Can we talk about 2 things very quickly?
Go ahead, Evan.
On the other end of this, one, Kevin, I believe last week I said I liked that Walter Clayton Jr., didn't I?
You did, and you didn't like him in the first half of that game on Monday night. But he was when he scored 0.
I take him I take the bad, I take the good, I put it together, and what do you got? Secondly, let's talk about the other consolation out of all of this is that you owe me lunch.
Yes, I do owe you lunch for that. You picked Florida to win, and I give you credit for that. And that was the thing. That the difference in that game, and I don't want to pick on Kelvin because he did an unbelievable job with Houston. And look, that's not NBA talent on that team. LJ Cryer is a marginal. He's a G League player, and he is the best.
I'm not sure either one of those teams has a starter, NBA starter.
Well, I do like Clayton. I think he's going to be really
Clayton a lot.
I like his size and I like his shooting touch. He's nice. I think he could be a nice player. But you're right. It's not either team was. I didn't see none of the teams except for Cooper Flagg. He's the bright shining light of the Final Four teams, right? But as far as NBA looks go. But, Todd Golden gave Florida some nice plays coming out of timeouts to set up and matter of fact, got Clayton free on one of them like that. Kelvin doesn't do that. Their offense basically is just dribble drive. And if you get a shot, take it, and then we'll crash the glass. That's their formula. And I guess that's what you probably in some ways have to do when you expend so much energy on defense. And certainly it has gotten him a long ways with that kind of talent. But, when Cryer drove the baseline that one time and just put his head down and buried it in one of the Florida players, I mean, it's like this looked like something on a playground. That was just awful. And when Cryer, when they look up to him as their top offensive threat, and when that's what he's doing at the end of the game, it's like I think the rest of the team looked at it like, oh no.
So much of defense in any sport, this is an oversimplification, but so much of defense in any sport is effort over execution, where offense is usually execution ranks a little higher than the effort.
Yes.
And they are such a defensive mentality team. When they struggle offensively, like you mentioned, I think it's like, well, we just got to go harder here. It's not about going harder. It's just not. And so you wind up with those type of plays, and it's just hard to. It's kind of hard to flip that switch, like you say. I mean, they play so much, expend so much energy on the defensive end. It is difficult for them to execute, but you can also tell. Look, you play where you spend your practice time too, and we know what he does with his practice times.
Well, I don't know if you saw any of those videos that were really interesting. They showed a couple of his practices, and one of them was guys diving for balls on the floor. I mean, how many of those you think they're doing in Kentucky? I remember that was like when Billy Gillespie, left A&M to go to Kentucky, and he had, he was famous at A&M for having trash cans set up around the floor for the guys to throw up in, because they were practicing so hard. Nobody was filling up those trash cans at Kentucky, and that's why Billy didn't last very long there. And he was asking the same kind of effort. The difference was that Kelvin knows that you got to get a certain kind of player to play that kind of game, and he did that. And I give him all the credit in the world. I mean, it's hard to or it's easy to criticize, but then you got a guy like Juwan Roberts who's in his 6th year at Houston. This is everybody complains now about college sports and NIL and the transfer portal. Well, Houston was none of that. They're just like a team out of the 90s.
They are.
You just transported them into 2025. So I give Houston its props for getting to the championship game again. That's 7 times without a title. That is the longest, or that's the most Final Four appearances by any team without a national championship. It is the banner we Cougars have to bear, but that's okay. I'm willing to do that.
I think we've spent entirely too much time on this episode focusing on things that don't matter and not enough time on where you're going to owe me lunch.
Yeah, I know that's where your priorities are, Evan. We'll go to S&D. How about that?
Oh, good.
Yeah,
you go there all the time anyway.
I know it's kind of the fallback position. I like
it's
going
our
there.
date night.
Yeah, it is. It is a good place. All right, that's going to do it for our podcast this week. We thank you for coming in. We'll be back next week, and we'll have maybe a little clearer picture of what the Cowboys could do. Who knows what might happen in the draft coming up. And, of course, by that time, we'll be able to talk a little bit about how that reunion with Luka went. So from everybody in here to everybody out there, thanks, and we'll see you next time.